The scar that ran from Katherine Foster's temple to her jaw had been with her for so long that she barely remembered what her face looked like before the mountain lion attack when she was 12 years old. Standing in front of the general store in Abiquiu, New Mexico, on a scorching July morning in 1876, she overheard Mrs. Henderson's voice drift through the open window as clearly as if the woman had meant for her to hear every word. Poor Katherine Foster, 23 years old and still unmarried. With that face, I suppose she will spend her days helping her father at the ranch until he passes, and then what will become of her? No man wants a wife who frightens children when they first see her. Katherine's fingers tightened around her shopping basket, but she kept her chin high as she stepped into the store. She had heard variations of this conversation her entire adult life. The women of Abiquiu had decided her fate years ago, and nothing she did seemed to change their minds. She was intelligent, capable of breaking horses better than most men in the territory, could shoot a rifle with deadly accuracy, and ran her father's ranch with efficiency after he had taken ill 3 years prior. But none of that mattered when people looked at her face and saw only the scar. Mrs. Henderson and her daughter Millicent stood near the fabric section, their voices dropping to whispers as Katherine approached the counter. She placed her order with Mr. Jameson, the shopkeeper, who treated her with the same courtesy he extended to everyone. At least some people in town saw past her appearance. "Will that be all, Miss Foster?" Mr. Jameson asked, his weathered face kind. "Yes, thank you. Please have it delivered to the ranch by Thursday if possible. We are expecting hands to arrive for the cattle drive, and I need those supplies ready." "Of course. Your father doing any better?" Katherine's expression softened slightly. "Some days are better than others. The doctor says his heart is weak, but he is stubborn enough to keep going." "That sounds like Thomas Foster, all right." Mr. Jameson chuckled, then lowered his voice. "Do not pay any mind to gossips, Miss Foster. You are worth 10 of most folks in this town." She nodded her gratitude, paid for her order, and left the store with her head high. The summer heat hit her immediately, the New Mexico sun beating down on the dusty streets of Abiquiu. The town sat nestled in a valley surrounded by red rock formations and desert landscape, beautiful in its harsh way. Katherine had lived here all her life and could not imagine being anywhere else, even if the people here had limited imaginations about her future. The ride back to the ranch took 40 minutes, and Katherine used the time to plan the next week's work. The cattle drive would take their herd north to Colorado, where they could get better prices. She had been managing these drives for 2 years now, ever since her father's illness had worsened. The ranch hands respected her, though she knew some of the newer ones were startled by her appearance at first. She had learned to address it head-on, meeting their eyes steadily until they realized she was not someone to pity or dismiss. The Foster Ranch spread across 500 acres of decent grazing land, with a main house that her grandfather had built in the 1840s when he first came to the territory. Katherine's mother had died giving birth to her, so it had always been just her and her father. He had never remarried, pouring all his energy into the ranch and raising his daughter to be strong and independent. He had never made her feel like her scar mattered, never treated her as damaged or less than whole. She found him sitting on the porch when she arrived, his face pale but his eyes alert. At 58, Thomas Foster looked older than his years, the illness having taken its toll. "How was town?" he asked as she dismounted. "The same as always," Katherine replied, leading her horse to the stable. "I ordered the supplies we need. They will be here by Thursday." "Good, good." He paused, watching her with the shrewd gaze that missed nothing. "You heard something today." It was not a question. Katherine finished unsaddling her horse before answering. "Mrs. Henderson has strong opinions about my future, or lack thereof. Her father's jaw tightened. Sarah Henderson is a fool, always has been. Perhaps, but she is not wrong about the facts. I am 23 and unmarried. By the standards of this town, that makes me a spinster with no prospects. By the standards of this town, a woman's only value is in finding a husband and producing children. You are worth more than that, Katie girl. You run this ranch better than I ever did. You have a mind for business and a way with animals that is pure gift. Any man would be lucky to have you. Katherine smiled, feeling the scar tissue pull tight on her cheek. You are my father, you have to say that. I say it because it is true. Thomas coughed, a rattling sound that worried her. Promise me something. Do not let those small-minded people make you believe you are less than you are. Your scar does not define you. Your heart, your strength, your character, those define you. She sat beside him on the porch steps. I know, Papa, and I am fine with my life, truly. I do not need a husband to be content. But even as she said the words, Katherine felt a small ache in her chest. She had convinced herself over the years that she did not want romantic love, that she was complete on her own. Yet sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she wondered what it would be like to have someone look at her with tenderness, to be touched with affection, to build a life with someone who saw past the surface to the woman beneath. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Katherine prepared for the arrival of the drovers who would help move the cattle. She hired a regular crew each year, men who knew the route and worked well together. But this year, her trail boss had sent word that he was bringing a new hand, someone experienced who had worked drives in Texas and Kansas. Thursday afternoon, the men arrived. Katherine walked out to greet them, counting heads. There was Jake Morrison, her trail boss, a grizzled veteran of 45 who had been making drives for 20 years. Behind him rode Dusty Matthews and Charlie Tucker, both reliable hands in their 30s. And then there was a fourth man she did not recognize. He sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. Even from a distance, there was something different about the way he carried himself, quiet confidence without arrogance. As they drew closer, Katherine could see his face was tanned and weathered from years in the sun, with deep-set eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. Miss Foster, Jake said, tipping his hat. Good to see you again. Let me introduce our new hand. This here is Preston Stone. Worked cattle drives all over Texas, came up through Kansas last year. He knows the business inside and out. Preston Stone dismounted with fluid grace and removed his hat, revealing those watchful eyes were a striking gray-blue. He looked at Katherine directly, and she braced herself for the inevitable reaction, the widening of eyes, the quick glance away, the uncomfortable shift in posture that people always had when they first saw her scar. It did not come. Instead, Preston met her eyes steadily and nodded with respect. Miss Foster, pleased to meet you. Jake speaks highly of you and your operation here. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that spoke of years spent in the Southern Territories. Katherine found herself momentarily caught off guard by his directness, by the fact that he looked at her face without flinching, without his gaze dropping to the scar. Mr. Stone, she replied, recovering her composure. Welcome to Foster Ranch. If Jake vouches for you, that is good enough for me. I expect hard work, honesty, and respect for the cattle and the land. In return, you will receive fair wages and decent food. That is all a man can ask for, Preston said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Over the next 3 days, Katherine watched Preston Stone work, and she had to admit that Jake had not exaggerated his abilities. Preston moved through the cattle with an almost intuitive understanding of their behavior. He could rope and brand with practiced efficiency, rode as if he had been born in the saddle, and showed patience with the younger steers that some drovers lacked. More than that, he worked well with the other hands, never grandstanding or trying to prove himself, just doing what needed to be done. What struck Katherine most was the way he treated her. He addressed her with the same respect he showed the men, asked her opinion on the route and timing, and implemented her decisions without question. But there was something else, something in the way his eyes lingered on her face sometimes, not on the scar but on her expressions, as if he was genuinely interested in what she thought and felt. On the third evening before the drive was set to begin, Katherine found herself near the corral where Preston was checking the hooves of his horse, a sturdy roan gelding with intelligent eyes. "Your horse has good lines," she observed, leaning against the fence rail. Preston glanced up, that slight smile appearing again. "Thank you. His name is Redmond. I have had him for 5 years now. He has carried me through just about every kind of terrain and weather you can imagine." "Where did you start working cattle?" Katherine asked, surprising herself with the question. She did not usually engage in personal conversation with the hands. "My father had a small ranch in eastern Texas. I grew up working cattle, but after he died, my brother inherited the place. I was 18, and there was not enough land for both of us to make a living, so I hired on with various outfits. Worked my way north over the years." "Do you miss having your own place?" Preston was quiet for a moment, his hand stilling on the horse's hoof. "Every day. But I have been saving my wages. Someday I will have enough to buy land, start my own herd. Until then, I go where the work is." There was no self-pity in his voice, just honest acknowledgement of his circumstances. Katherine understood that kind of determination, the willingness to work toward a dream even when it seemed far away. "What made you come to New Mexico?" she asked. "Heard the country was beautiful. Wanted to see it for myself." He set down his horse's hoof and straightened, meeting her eyes. "The reports were accurate. This is striking land. Harsh but honest, if that makes sense." "It does," Katherine said. "I have always thought the same thing. This land does not lie to you. It tells you exactly what it is, and you either learn to live with it or you do not survive." Preston nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "You grew up here, born and raised." "My grandfather claimed this land in the 40s, built the main house with his own hands. My father expanded the operation, and now I run it while he recovers from his illness." "Jake mentioned your father was not well. That must be difficult, managing everything on your own." "I have good people working for me," Katherine said, "and I learned from the best. My father made sure I knew every aspect of ranching. He never treated me like I was less capable because I was a woman." "He sounds like a wise man." Katherine felt a warmth spread through her chest at Preston's words. There was genuine respect in his tone, not the patronizing courtesy that some men offered. She found herself wanting to continue the conversation, to learn more about this quiet cowboy who seemed so different from other men she had known. But before she could speak again, Charlie Tucker called out that dinner was ready. The moment passed, and Preston gave her a polite nod before heading toward the bunkhouse. Katherine watched him go, puzzled by the unfamiliar flutter in her stomach. The cattle drive began at dawn on Monday morning. Katherine rode at the front alongside Jake, with Preston and the other hands positioned along the sides and rear of the herd. They were moving 800 head north toward Colorado, a journey that would take approximately 3 weeks if the weather held and they did not encounter any major problems. The first week passed smoothly. The cattle moved well, and the crew worked together with practiced efficiency. Katherine found herself increasingly aware of Preston's presence. He seemed to have a sixth sense for where problems might develop, positioning himself to head off potential stampedes before they started, spotting weak or injured animals before they slowed the herd. On the 8th night, they made camp near a creek that ran between red rock formations. The sunset painted the landscape in shades of orange and pink, and the air finally cooled after another scorching day. Katherine was checking the supplies when Preston approached, carrying 2 tin cups of coffee. "Thought you might want some," he said, offering her one. "Thank you." She accepted the cup, surprised by the gesture. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly what she needed. Preston stood beside her, looking out at the herd settled for the night. "You run a good operation, Miss Foster. The cattle are healthy, and you have chosen your men well. This has been one of the smoothest drives I've worked. Please call me Katherine, and thank you. I have been fortunate to have people like Jake who know what they are doing." "It is more than that," Preston said quietly. "You have good instincts. I have seen you make decisions on the trail, quick calls that turned out right. That is not something you can teach. Either you have it or you do not." Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the coffee. Compliments about her appearance had always been awkward and obviously false, but praise for her abilities meant something real. "I appreciate that," she managed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Katherine felt something shift between them, a connection forming that both excited and frightened her. She had never experienced anything like this before, this pull toward another person. "Can I ask you something?" Preston said, his voice careful. Katherine braced herself, assuming he was finally going to ask about her scar. "Of course. Why do you still live in Abiquiu? A woman with your skills could run a ranch anywhere. Seems like that town does not appreciate what they have." The question surprised her. "You have been to town?" "Rode in yesterday to pick up some supplies Jake needed. Heard some women talking outside the general store. They said some unkind things about you." Katherine felt her shoulders tense. "The women of Abiquiu have strong opinions about my future." "Their opinions are foolish," Preston said, an edge entering his voice. "I have worked with a lot of people over the years, men and women both. You are one of the most capable ranchers I have met, and that has nothing to do with your gender. Those women judge you on the most superficial things while ignoring everything that actually matters." The fierce defense in his words made Katherine's throat tight. "You barely know me. I know what I have seen. I know you treat your people fairly, care for your animals, and work harder than anyone else on this drive. I know you are up before dawn and the last one to sleep. I know you checked on every single head of cattle the first night to make sure none were injured from the initial movement. Those things tell me who you are." Katherine turned to face him fully, searching his expression in the fading light. "Why do you care what those women say about me?" Preston held her gaze, and she saw something vulnerable flash across his face before he answered. "Because I do not like seeing good people diminished by small minds, and because I think you deserve better than a town that cannot see past a scar to the remarkable woman beneath." Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such direct honesty and fierce appreciation. She did not know how to respond, what to say that would not reveal how deeply his words affected her. "I should check on my father before it gets too dark," she finally said, her voice unsteady. "He is back at the ranch with our foreman watching over things." Preston nodded, accepting the deflection with grace. "Of course. Thank you for the conversation, Katherine." The way he said her name, soft and warm, sent shivers down her spine. She returned to her bedroll that night, unable to stop thinking about Preston Stone, about the way he looked at her, the things he had said. She had spent so many years building walls around her heart, convincing herself that romantic love was not for her, that she did not need it. But Preston was making those walls crack, and she did not know whether to be terrified or hopeful. The next morning brought new challenges. A section of the herd spooked at a rattlesnake, and several steers broke away from the main group. Katherine and Preston rode after them, working in tandem to circle the animals and guide them back. They moved together with surprising coordination, anticipating each other's movements as if they had been working as partners for years instead of days. When they finally got the steers settled back with the herd, both were breathing hard, adrenaline still pumping. Katherine laughed, exhilarated by the chase and their success. "That was good work," she said, her eyes bright. Preston grinned, and the expression transformed his usually serious face. "You are one hell of a rider, Katherine Foster. I have never seen anyone handle a horse like that. My father taught me. He said if I was going to run this ranch, I needed to be better than good. I needed to be excellent. Well, you surpassed that goal." Preston's grin faded into something softer, more intimate. "You are extraordinary." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple compliment. Katherine felt her heart beating faster, felt the pull toward this man growing stronger. She wanted to say something, to acknowledge what was building between them, but fear held her tongue. What if she was misreading the situation? What if his kindness was just that, kindness, and not something deeper? Before she could decide, Jake rode up to report another issue with the supply wagon. The moment passed and they returned to work, but Katherine could not shake the feeling that something significant had shifted between them. That night, a storm rolled in across the plains. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning split the sky. The cattle grew restless, and all hands were needed to keep them calm. Katherine rode the perimeter, her voice low and soothing as she moved among the nervous animals. Rain began to fall, cold and heavy, soaking through her clothes within minutes. She saw Preston on the other side of the herd, equally drenched, his focus entirely on the cattle. For hours they worked to keep the herd from stampeding, their voices barely audible over the thunder. It was exhausting, nerve-wracking work, and by the time the storm finally passed near midnight, Katherine was shaking with cold and fatigue. Preston appeared beside her as she dismounted, his hand steadying her elbow when she stumbled slightly. "You need to get warm and dry," he said, his voice rough with concern. "So do you," she pointed out, but she was too tired to argue when he guided her toward the supply wagon where they kept spare blankets. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, then built up the fire that had nearly died in the rain. Within minutes, the flames were crackling again, throwing welcome heat. The other hands had scattered to check on different sections of the herd, leaving Katherine and Preston alone by the fire. "Thank you," Katherine said, her teeth still chattering slightly. Preston shed his own soaked coat and moved closer to the fire. "You were incredible out there. I have seen experienced drovers panic in storms like that, but you never wavered." "I was terrified the whole time," Katherine admitted. "But the cattle needed someone calm, so I had to be that person. That is the definition of courage, being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." Preston looked at her, firelight dancing across his features. "Katherine, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race again, but this time it had nothing to do with the storm. "What is it?" He seemed to struggle with the words, his usual quiet confidence faltering. "I have worked a lot of ranches, met a lot of people. I learned early on not to get attached to places or people, because I would just be moving on again in a few months. It was easier to keep my distance, do my job, and ride away without looking back." Katherine waited, barely breathing. "But this time it is different," Preston continued, his eyes locked on hers. "You are different. From the moment I met you, I could not stop thinking about you. Your strength, your kindness to the animals, the way you lead without demanding, the sound of your laugh, the fierce intelligence in your eyes. I know I am just a drifter with nothing to offer, and you probably have no interest in someone like me, but I had to tell you. I had to let you know that you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. All the walls she had built around her heart were crumbling, and for the first time in her life, she did not try to stop them. Preston, I have spent my entire adult life believing that no man would ever see me as anything other than the scarred woman to be pitied. The town has told me repeatedly that I will never marry, never have the kind of life other women have. I convinced myself I was fine with that I did not want or need romantic love. She paused, gathering her courage. But then you arrived, and you looked at me like I was whole. You never stared at my scar, never treated me with pity or discomfort. You saw me, the real me, and you did not turn away. You made me realize that maybe I do want those things I convinced myself I did not need. Maybe I want someone to share my life with, someone who sees me the way you seem to. Preston moved closer, his hand reaching up to gently touch her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her scar with infinite tenderness. This does not define you, Katherine. It is just one small part of your story. When I look at you, I see a woman who survived something traumatic and came out stronger. I see courage and beauty and grace. I see someone I could very easily fall in love with if you would let me. Tears pricked Catherine's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. For the first time in more years than she could count, they were tears of joy, of relief, of hope. I think I could fall in love with you too, she whispered. Preston leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But Katherine did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the connection that sparked between them like lightning. When his lips met hers, gentle and warm despite the cold rain still dripping from their clothes, Katherine felt something inside her finally settle into place, like a piece of a puzzle she had not known was missing. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, Preston rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cupping her scarred cheek. I do not have much to offer you right now, he said quietly. Just a good horse, some saved wages, and a strong back for work. But I am honest, and I will work harder than any man you have ever met. If you will have me, I will spend every day proving that you are worth more than this whole territory put together. Katherine smiled, feeling the scar tissue pull tight, but for the first time in her life, she did not care. I do not need you to prove anything, Preston. You already have. And as for what you have to offer, it is everything I need. Your heart, your integrity, your partnership. That is worth more than all the land and cattle in New Mexico. They stayed by the fire as the storm cleared and the stars emerged once more, talking quietly about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Preston told her about losing his father, about the difficulty of leaving his family's land, about the loneliness of years spent drifting from place to place. Katherine shared her childhood memories, the mountain lion attack that had left her scarred, the years of cruel comments and pitying looks, her father's unwavering support. I want you to meet him, Katherine said as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. My father. I want him to know that his faith in me was not misplaced, that someone finally sees what he always saw. I would be honored, Preston replied, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The rest of the drive took on a new quality. Katherine and Preston worked side by side, their partnership now infused with deeper meaning. The other hands noticed the change between them, but if they had opinions, they kept them to themselves. Jake Morrison gave Katherine a knowing smile one evening and simply said, "About time you found someone worthy of you, Miss Foster." When they finally reached the stockyards in Colorado, Katherine got excellent prices for the herd. The buyer was impressed with the quality of the cattle and their condition after the long drive, and he promised to work with her again the following year. The journey back to Abiquiu took less time without the cattle slowing them down. Katherine found herself both eager to get home and reluctant for the drive to end, knowing that once they returned to the ranch, real life would intrude on the bubble she and Preston had created. "What happens now?" she asked Preston on the last night before they would reach Abiquiu. "That depends on you," he said carefully. "I could ride on to the next job or I could stay. I want to stay, Katherine. I want to build a life with you, help you run the ranch, be the partner you deserve. But I understand if it is too fast, if you need time to think about it." Katherine looked at this man who had changed everything in a matter of weeks. She thought about returning to Abiquiu, about the gossip that would surely follow when she arrived with Preston Stone. She thought about Mrs. Henderson and the other women who had written her off as a spinster with no prospects, and she realized she did not care what they thought. "I want you to stay," she said firmly. "I want you to meet my father, and I want to introduce you to the town as the man I intend to marry, if you will have me." Preston's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "If I will have you, Katherine, I would marry you tomorrow if you would say yes." "Then yes," she laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Yes, I will marry you, Preston Stone." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed, both of them grinning like fools. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his love and commitment into the gesture. They arrived at the Foster ranch the next afternoon. Thomas Foster was sitting on the porch, looking frailer than when Katherine had left, but with his eyes still sharp and alert. She dismounted quickly and ran to embrace him, relief flooding through her at seeing him alive and relatively well. "Welcome home, Katie girl," he said, hugging her tight. "I hear the drive was a success." "It was. I got excellent prices." She pulled back, suddenly nervous. "Papa, there is someone I want you to meet." Preston had dismounted and was standing respectfully near his horse, waiting to be invited forward. Katherine beckoned him over, taking his hand when he reached her side. "Papa, this is Preston Stone. He worked the drive with us, and he is the man I intend to marry." Thomas Foster's eyebrows rose, and he studied Preston with the same shrewd gaze he had always used to assess livestock and men. Preston met his eyes steadily, not flinching under the scrutiny. "Is that so?" Thomas finally said. "And what makes you think you are good enough for my daughter, Mr. Stone?" "I do not think I am good enough for her, sir," Preston replied honestly. "She is the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I know I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of her. But I love her, and I will work until my last breath to make her happy and support her in everything she does." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Katherine, bring this man inside. I want to hear how you two met and how he convinced my stubborn daughter to accept a proposal." Over dinner, Katherine and Preston told the story of the drive, of how they had worked together and grown to know each other. Thomas listened carefully, asking pointed questions, watching how Preston treated his daughter. By the end of the evening, he gave his blessing with tears in his eyes. "I always knew someone would see you for who you truly are," he told Katherine. "I am grateful I lived to see this day." The next morning, Katherine rode into Abiquiu with Preston at her side. She stopped at the general store where Mrs. Henderson and several other women were gathered near the fabric section as usual. "Miss Foster," Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes immediately going to Preston with undisguised curiosity. I heard your drive was successful. And who might this be? Katherine smiled, linking her arm through Preston's. This is Preston Stone, my fiancé. We will be married next month, and he will be joining me as co-owner of the Foster Ranch. The stunned silence was deeply satisfying. Mrs. Henderson's mouth actually fell open, and Millicent looked between Katherine and Preston with obvious disbelief. Your fiancé, Mrs. Henderson finally managed, but I thought. That is, we all assumed. You assumed I would never find a husband because of my scar, Katherine said calmly, her voice pleasant but firm. You and the other women of this town decided my fate based on the most superficial judgment possible. But Preston looked past the surface and saw who I actually am. He values my strength, my intelligence, and my heart. And I am grateful every day that I did not settle for someone who could not do the same. She did not wait for a response. She simply collected her order from a grinning Mr. Jameson and left the store with Preston, feeling freer than she had in years. The wedding took place on a warm September afternoon at the ranch, with the red rock formations of Abiquiu providing a stunning backdrop. Thomas Foster, though weak, insisted on walking his daughter down the makeshift aisle they had created in the yard. Jake Morrison and the other ranch hands attended, along with a few people from town who had always treated Katherine with genuine kindness. Katherine wore a simple white dress that her father had purchased in Santa Fe, and Preston wore a new suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. But the most important part of the day was the moment when Preston took Katherine's hands and said his vows, his voice strong and clear. Katherine Foster, you are my miracle. You are the home I have been searching for all these years. I promise to stand beside you as your equal partner, to support your dreams, to love you with every breath I take. Your strength inspires me, your kindness humbles me, and your love makes me want to be a better man. I will spend the rest of my life showing you that you are cherished, valued, and loved beyond measure. Katherine's own vows were just as heartfelt. Preston Stone, you saw me when others looked away. You valued me when others dismissed me. You loved me when I had convinced myself love was not for me. I promise to be your partner in all things, to build a life with you based on honesty, respect, and deep affection. You have given me the greatest gift anyone could offer, the knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am. I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed Katherine with such tender passion that several of the ranch hands whooped and hollered. Thomas Foster wiped tears from his eyes, his face radiant with joy. The celebration that followed was simple but heartfelt. There was music and dancing, good food, and genuine happiness. Katherine danced with her father first, then with her new husband, feeling like she was floating. Preston held her close, his hand warm on her back, and whispered in her ear, "Thank you for taking a chance on a drifting cowboy." "Thank you for asking me one gentle question," she replied, smiling up at him. He looked confused. "What question was that?" "In the store when you bought me coffee that first night by the campfire. You asked if I wanted some." It was such a simple gesture, but it was the first time someone offered me something without expectation or pity. It was the moment I started to believe that maybe you were different. Preston pulled her closer. "I will spend every day proving to you that I am exactly the man you deserve." The first months of their marriage were a period of adjustment and joy. Preston threw himself into the work of the ranch with the dedication Katherine had expected, but he also brought fresh ideas and perspectives that improved their operation. He suggested rotating the grazing areas more frequently to preserve the grass, implemented better record-keeping for the breeding program, and built stronger relationships with buyers in Colorado and Kansas. More than that, He was a true partner to Katherine in every sense. He consulted her on every major decision, valued her opinions, and supported her authority with the ranch hands. When one new hire made a disrespectful comment about taking orders from a woman, Preston fired him on the spot, making it clear that Katherine was not just the owner's daughter, she was the co-owner and deserved complete respect. Thomas Foster's health continued to decline slowly, but he seemed content now, often sitting on the porch and watching Katherine and Preston work together. One evening in late November, he called them both to sit with him. "I want you to know something," he said, his voice weaker than it had been even a few months earlier. "Katherine, you have given me the greatest gift a father could ask for. You found someone who sees your true worth, who makes you happy. Preston, you have honored every promise you made. You love my daughter the way she deserves to be loved." "Papa, do not talk like this," Katherine said, her throat tight with emotion. "You are going to be fine." Thomas smiled gently. "We both know my time is coming, Katie girl, but I am at peace. I am leaving the ranch in the best hands possible, both of yours together. That is all I ever wanted." He passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, with Katherine and Preston at his bedside. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had built, beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Katherine grieved deeply, but she found comfort in Preston's steady presence, in his willingness to hold her when she cried and listen when she needed to talk about her father. "He was so proud of you," Preston told her one night as they sat on the porch where Thomas had spent so many hours. "He told me once that you were his greatest achievement, not the ranch or the cattle, but raising you to be the woman you are." Katherine leaned into her husband's embrace, drawing strength from his solid warmth. "I am grateful he got to see us married, that he knew I found someone who loved me." "He knew more than that," Preston said. "He knew you found someone who was your equal, who would build a life with you based on partnership and respect. That meant everything to him." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Katherine thought about how much her life had changed in less than a year, how Preston had walked into her world and transformed everything. The women of Abiquiu still gossiped, but their words no longer had power over her. She had found something infinitely more valuable than their approval. She had found genuine love and partnership. Winter passed into spring, and the ranch prospered under their joint management. Katherine and Preston worked from dawn to dusk, but they also made time for each other, for quiet conversations and stolen kisses in the barn, for dancing in the kitchen when the day's work was done. Their relationship deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and passionate love. In May of 1877, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Preston one evening after dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face lit up with such pure joy that her nervousness melted away. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are," she confirmed, laughing as he swept her into his arms and spun her around gently. "A baby," he repeated, setting her down carefully as if she might break. "Katherine, you have given me everything: a home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I cannot believe how blessed I am." "We are blessed," she corrected, placing her hand over her still flat stomach. "We are building the life we both dreamed of." Preston dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her belly, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I promise to love you and your mother with everything I have. You are already so wanted, so loved." Katherine ran her fingers through his dark hair, feeling tears of happiness slide down her cheeks. This moment, this perfect moment of anticipation and love, was something she had never dared to hope for. But Preston had made it possible by seeing past her scar to the woman beneath, by loving her completely and without reservation. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Preston was attentive without being overbearing, helping with the heavier ranch work while still allowing Katherine to remain involved in the daily operations. He built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving intricate designs into the headboard during the evenings while Katherine knitted tiny clothes. On a cold December morning in 1877, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, but when Preston finally heard the baby's first cry, he rushed into the bedroom where Katherine lay exhausted but radiant. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant in Katherine's arms. "Healthy and strong." Preston sat beside his wife, staring at their son with awe and wonder. The baby had a shock of dark hair and already showed signs of having his father's strong features. Katherine looked up at her husband, seeing tears streaming down his face. "What should we name him?" she asked softly. "Thomas," Preston said immediately, "after your father, if that is all right with you." Katherine's own tears fell faster. "Thomas Stone, it is perfect." Preston leaned down to kiss his wife's forehead, then gently touched his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around his father's finger, and Preston let out a shaky laugh. "He is incredible, Katherine. You are incredible. Thank you for this gift." Those first months with baby Thomas were exhausting and joyful in equal measure. Preston proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with the baby at night when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, and singing soft lullabies in his deep voice that never failed to soothe their son. The ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about the quality of Foster cattle, and buyers came from farther distances to purchase their stock. Preston's improvements to their breeding program were paying off, and Katherine's business acumen ensured they got top prices. They hired additional hands to help with the increased workload, and Preston proved to be an excellent judge of character, bringing in men who were hardworking and trustworthy. When Thomas was 2 years old, Katherine became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the summer of 1880 they welcomed a daughter. She had Katherine's features and Preston's gray-blue eyes, and they named her Sarah, after Katherine's mother. "Now our family is complete," Katherine said, holding Sarah while Thomas toddled around the bedroom, chattering constantly. Preston sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Katherine's shoulders, watching their children with deep contentment. "I never imagined I could be this happy. There were years when I thought I would spend my whole life drifting from place to place, never having a real home or family. You gave me everything, Katherine." "We gave each other everything," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You gave me the courage to believe I deserved love. You showed me that my worth was not determined by my appearance or the small minds of gossiping women. You saw me, Preston. You really saw me." He turned to kiss her gently. "I see you every day, and every day I fall more in love with you. You are the strongest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Our children are blessed to have you as their mother." Time passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas proved to be a natural horseman, riding before he could barely walk, showing the same intuitive understanding of animals that Katherine possessed. Sarah was quieter, thoughtful, with a gift for numbers that Preston nurtured by teaching her the ranch accounts. The cattle operation grew steadily. They purchased additional land, expanding their grazing territory. Preston's reputation as an honest dealer and skilled rancher spread throughout New Mexico and into Colorado and Texas. Buyers trusted his word, knowing that Foster cattle were exactly as advertised. Katherine and Preston made a formidable team. She handled the business side negotiations, contracts, financial planning, while Preston managed the day-to-day ranch operations and the breeding program. But there was significant overlap, with each consulting the other on major decisions. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and trust that only deepened with time. In the spring of 1885, when Thomas was 7 and Sarah was 5, Katherine stood on the porch watching her family. Preston was teaching Thomas how to rope a fence post, demonstrating the technique with patient repetition, while Sarah sat nearby, drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick. The scene filled Katherine with such profound gratitude that she had to blink back tears. Preston looked up and caught her eye, giving her that smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. He said something to the children, then walked over to join her on the porch, sliding his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life could have been," Katherine said honestly. "If you had not come to work that cattle drive, if you had not seen past my scar, if you had not had the courage to tell me how you felt, I would have spent my life alone, convinced that was my fate." Preston turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You know what I was thinking that first day when I met you? I thought you were the most striking woman I had ever seen, not in spite of your scar, but because of everything you were. The way you carried yourself with such dignity and strength, the way you looked me straight in the eye without apology or shame, I was drawn to you immediately." "You never stared at my scar," Katherine said. "You were the first person who did not, because it did not matter. It was just a part of your face, no more significant than the color of your eyes or the shape of your nose. What mattered was the person you were: brave, intelligent, capable, kind. Those were the things that made me fall in love with you." Katherine kissed him, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they pulled apart, Sarah was tugging on Preston's sleeve. "Papa, can you show me how to rope too?" "Of course, sweetheart." He scooped her up, making her giggle. "But first, let us ask your mother if she wants to show us all how it is really done. She was roping before I was even born." "That is not true," Katherine laughed. "You are only 3 years younger than me. Still, you are the expert." Preston set Sarah down and handed Katherine a rope. "Show us your skills, Mrs. Stone." Katherine took the rope, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. She had been roping since she was younger than Thomas, had taught Preston some of her techniques during those early years of their marriage. She swung the lasso with practiced ease, catching the fence post on the first try. Thomas and Sarah cheered, and Preston applauded. "Still the best roper in New Mexico," he declared. They spent the afternoon together as a family, teaching the children, laughing, enjoying the perfect spring weather. These were the moments Katherine treasured most, not the successful business deals or the growing prosperity, but the simple joy of being with the people she loved. As the years continued to pass, their ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. They employed over 20 hands full-time, with additional help hired during the busy seasons. Preston developed a breeding program that produced some of the finest cattle in the Southwest, and Katherine's business acumen ensured they maximized their profits while maintaining their reputation for integrity. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man who shared his parents' love for the land and the animals. At 18, he was already taking on significant responsibility, managing sections of the operation with skill that matched men twice his age. Sarah, at 16, surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study business and help expand their operation into new markets. Preston and Katherine supported both children's ambitions, proud of the people they were becoming. In 1893, on their 16th wedding anniversary, Preston took Katherine on a rare trip away from the ranch. They rode into the backcountry, camping beneath the stars as they had done during that first cattle drive so many years ago. Lying beside the fire, Katherine rested her head on Preston's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You ever regret staying?" she asked quietly. "You could have kept drifting, seen more of the country, had adventures." Preston's arms tightened around her. "Never. Not for a single moment. This life with you, with our children, running this ranch, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I dared to dream. You are my adventure, Katherine. You have been from the moment I met you. I love you," she whispered. "More now than even on the day we married. You have been my partner in every sense, my equal, my greatest supporter. You made me believe I was worthy of love, and you have spent every day since proving it." "You were always worthy of love," Preston said fiercely. "I just had the good fortune to be the man who got to love you. The man who gets to wake up beside you every morning, who gets to work with you every day, who gets to grow old with you. I am the luckiest man who ever lived." They made love beneath the stars, their passion tempered by 16 years of marriage but no less intense for it. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, talking about their children, the ranch, their dreams for the future. They spoke about expanding into Colorado, about buying additional land, about the possibility of grandchildren someday. "Thomas has been spending a lot of time with the Johnson girl," Katherine mentioned. "Emily. She seems like a lovely young woman." "She is," Preston agreed. "Smart, hardworking, kind. If he decides to court her seriously, she would be a good match for him." "Our son married," Katherine mused. "That makes me feel old." Preston laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "You are not old. You are seasoned like fine leather." Katherine swatted his arm playfully. "That is not the romantic compliment you think it is. No, let me try again. You are like a perfectly aged wine, better with every passing year." "Marginally better," Katherine conceded, smiling in the darkness. They returned to the ranch refreshed and reconnected, ready to face the challenges and joys ahead. True to Katherine's observation, Thomas began courting Emily Johnson seriously, and within a year they were engaged. The wedding took place at the Foster Ranch, just as Katherine and Preston's had, with the family and friends gathering to celebrate. Watching her son exchange vows with his bride, Katherine felt Preston's hand slip into hers. She glanced at him and saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes: pride, joy, and a touch of bittersweet awareness that their children were forging their own paths now. "We did well," Preston whispered. "We did," Katherine agreed. A year later, they welcomed their first grandchild, a baby girl that Thomas and Emily named Katherine, after the grandmother who had built the legacy they now all shared. Holding her tiny namesake, Katherine Foster Stone felt the full circle of her life. She had gone from being the scarred girl who was told she would never marry to the matriarch of a thriving family, respected throughout the territory, deeply loved by a man who saw her true worth. Sarah, meanwhile, pursued her education and returned to the ranch with innovative ideas about marketing and expansion. She negotiated deals that opened new markets for their cattle, proving herself every bit as capable as her mother. Preston and Katherine gradually began stepping back from the day-to-day operations, trusting their children to carry on what they had built. On a warm evening in the summer of 1900, Preston and Katherine sat on the porch of the house where she had been born, where they had raised their children, where they had built a life together. They were both in their late 40s now, gray threading through their hair, lines marking their faces from years of sun and laughter. "You remember what you said to me that night by the campfire?" Katherine asked, her hand in Preston's. "During the storm on that first cattle drive." "I said a lot of things that night," Preston replied with a smile. "You said I was extraordinary, that I was the most remarkable woman you had ever met. Those words changed my life, Preston. They made me believe I could be loved, that I deserved to be loved. Preston lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her scarred knuckles with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. You are still extraordinary, Katherine, more so now than ever. You built this ranch into something beyond what your father or grandfather could have imagined. You raised two incredible children. You changed the minds of an entire town about what a woman could accomplish. And you loved me completely, making me a better man than I ever could have been without you. Katherine leaned against her husband, feeling the same contentment and peace she had known since the day she said yes to his gentle question all those years ago. The scar on her face was still there, faded with time but permanent. But it no longer mattered, had not mattered for decades. Preston had taught her that her worth was not determined by her appearance, and she had spent years proving it to herself and the world. "I want you to know something," she said softly. "That day in town, when Mrs. Henderson and the other women said I would never find a husband, part of me believed them. I thought my scar made me unlovable, that I was destined to be alone. But you proved them wrong with one gentle question asking if I wanted coffee by that campfire. It was such a simple gesture, but it was the beginning of everything. You treated me with respect and kindness without expecting anything in return. You saw me as a person worthy of consideration. That question, that small act of thoughtfulness, opened my heart to the possibility of love." Preston turned to face her fully, his eyes shining with emotion. "I asked if you wanted coffee and you gave me the world. I think I got the better end of that bargain." "We both won," Katherine said firmly. "We built this together, as partners, as equals, as people who loved each other enough to face every challenge together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had nurtured and grown. In the distance, they could hear Thomas teaching his daughter to ride, could see Sarah reviewing ledgers in the office window. The ranch was alive with the next generation, carrying forward the legacy of hard work, integrity, and love. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Preston stood and offered his hand to Katherine. "Dance with me," she laughed, taking his hand and allowing him to pull her to her feet. "There is no music. We do not need music. We never have." And so they danced on the porch, swaying gently to a rhythm only they could hear, the same rhythm that had sustained them through 16 years of marriage and countless challenges. They danced as they had on their wedding day, as they had in the kitchen countless times, as they would continue to dance for all the years to come. Katherine rested her head on Preston's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sage and home. This was her life, the life she had been told she would never have. A husband who loved her completely, children who made her proud, a legacy that would outlast her, and a love story that had proven every doubter wrong. "Thank you," she whispered against Preston's chest. "For what?" he asked, his hand warm on her back. "For seeing me, for loving me, for proving that I was worth more than they said I was." Preston pulled back enough to look into her eyes, his expression tender and fierce at once. "You were always worth everything, Katherine. I just had the wisdom to recognize it, and I will spend every day I have left making sure you never doubt it." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, the same way he had kissed her in the rain during that storm so many years ago. And Katherine kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture, knowing that she had found something infinitely precious, a partner who saw her soul, a love that transcended appearances, a life built on mutual respect and deep affection. The years continued to flow like water, bringing new challenges and joys. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch house with laughter and noise. Thomas and Emily had 3 more children, while Sarah eventually married a kind rancher from Colorado and had 2 children of her own. The Foster Ranch prospered under the management of the next generation, with Preston and Katherine serving as wise advisors who had seen the business through booms and busts. In their 50s and then their 60s, Preston and Katherine remained active on the ranch, though they no longer worked from dawn to dusk. They took time to travel, finally seeing some of the country Preston had once drifted through. They visited Texas and Kansas, Colorado and Arizona, always returning to New Mexico and the ranch that was their heart and home. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1917, their children and grandchildren threw them a grand celebration. The ranch was filled with people from all over the territory, friends and business associates and family. Katherine wore a beautiful blue dress that Preston had bought for her in Santa Fe, and Preston wore a suit that his grandchildren said made him look distinguished. During the celebration, their oldest grandchild, young Katherine, now a confident young woman of 21, stood to make a toast. "My grandmother was told she would never find a husband. The people of this town decided her future based on a scar, on the most superficial judgment possible. But my grandfather proved them all wrong. He saw the incredible woman beneath, and he had the courage to love her openly and completely. Together, they built something remarkable, not just this ranch, but a family based on love, respect, and partnership. They showed all of us what marriage should be, what love looks like when it is real and deep and lasting." To Katherine and Preston Stone, "The finest example of love I have ever known." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment. Katherine felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy and gratitude. She looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the friends who had stood by them through the years, at the ranch that represented decades of hard work and dedication. And then she looked at Preston, who was watching her with the same love and admiration she had seen in his eyes on their wedding day. "I love you," she mouthed. "I love you more," he mouthed back, making her laugh through her tears. That night, after the guests had departed and the ranch had settled into quiet, Preston and Katherine lay in bed together, their bodies aligned in the familiar way of longtime partners. 40 years, Katherine said wonderingly. 40 years of marriage, and I love you more today than I did when we started." "That is because love grows when it is tended properly," Preston replied, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "We have watered it with respect, fed it with trust, given it room to breathe. Of course it grew. You should have been a poet instead of a rancher." "I am a rancher who loves his wife. That is poetry enough." Katherine smiled in the darkness, feeling blessed beyond measure. She thought about that young woman she had been, scarred and convinced she was unlovable, and she wished she could tell her that everything would be all right, that a cowboy with gray-blue eyes would walk into her life and see her worth, that he would prove all the doubters wrong with his gentle kindness and fierce devotion, that she would build a life beyond her wildest dreams. As she drifted toward sleep, Preston's arms around her, Katherine whispered one final prayer of gratitude for the man who had loved her completely, who had spent 40 years proving that she was worthy of love, who had given her everything she never dared to hope for. The seasons continued to turn, and Preston and Katherine grew older together with grace and dignity. In their 70s, they were still sharp-minded and active, still dispensing wisdom to their children and grandchildren, still deeply in love. They spent their days in quieter pursuits, now reading, sitting on the porch, taking gentle rides through the land they loved. One spring morning in 1925, when Katherine was 72 and Preston was 69, they rode out together to the hill where her father was buried. They did this often, bringing flowers and spending time in quiet reflection. But today felt different, more significant somehow. "Do you have regrets?" Katherine asked as they stood looking out over the ranch spread below them. Preston was quiet for a long moment. "Only one. I regret that I did not find you sooner, that we did not have more years together. But even that is not really a regret, because the timing was perfect. We met when we were both ready, when we could appreciate what we had found. I regret the years I wasted believing I was not worthy of love," Katherine admitted. "But I am grateful for the lesson they taught me that other people's judgments do not define us. We define ourselves by our choices, our actions, our hearts." Preston took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "You taught me that lesson too. Before I met you, I thought I was just a drifter, someone with no real purpose or value beyond the work I could do. You showed me that I was capable of more, that I could be a partner and a father and a man of substance. You believed in me when I did not always believe in myself." They stood together in silence, watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue sky. Katherine felt a profound sense of peace, of completion. She had lived a full life, had loved and been loved deeply, had built something lasting. Whatever time remained to them was a gift, and she intended to cherish every moment. As they rode back to the ranch house, they saw their great-grandchildren playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. The newest generation, carrying forward the legacy that Katherine and Preston had created. It was a legacy built on love, on the revolutionary idea that worth was not determined by appearance or the judgments of small-minded people, but by character and heart. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose, Preston pulled Katherine close and said the words he had spoken countless times over their decades together. "You are still the most remarkable woman I have ever known." And Katherine, her face lined with age and marked by that long-ago scar, smiled and replied as she always did, "And you are still the man who saw past the surface to the truth beneath. The man who proved that love is real when it is based on respect and partnership and genuine seeing of another soul. I would choose you again, Preston Stone, in this life and any other." They sat together as the stars emerged. Two people who had found something precious and rare, a love that transcended appearances, that deepened with time, that proved stronger than doubt or fear or the cruel judgments of others. A cowboy and a scarred woman who had built an empire together, not of land and cattle, though they had that too, but of love and family and enduring partnership. And when the people of Abiquiu told the story in years to come, they would remember Katherine Foster Stone not as the scarred woman who defied expectations, but as the formidable matriarch who built one of the finest ranches in New Mexico. They would remember Preston Stone not as the drifting cowboy, but as the devoted husband and wise businessman who stood as equal partner to an extraordinary woman. But most of all, they would remember the love story, how Preston proved wrong everyone who said Katherine would never find a husband, how he saw her true worth with one gentle question, how their partnership transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. It became a story passed down through generations, a reminder that real love sees beyond the surface, that worth is determined by character, and that the deepest happiness comes from being truly seen and valued by another person. Preston and Katherine lived to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They passed within months of each other, neither wanting to live long without their partner. They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones bearing simple inscriptions that told their story. Katherine Foster Stone, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She built an empire with courage, love, and vision. Preston Stone, beloved husband, father, grandfather. He saw worth where others saw only scars, and beneath both inscriptions, a single line they had chosen together: partners in all things, together forever. The ranch continued to prosper under their descendants' care, each generation adding to the legacy while honoring the foundation that Katherine and Preston had built. The story of their love became part of the ranch's identity, told to each new generation as a reminder of what truly matters: not wealth or appearance or the opinions of others, but love, respect, partnership, and the courage to see another person's true worth. Years later, when young people asked their elders about the famous Katherine Foster Stone, they would hear about her business acumen, her skill with horses, her fierce determination. But they would also hear about the cowboy who looked past her scar to the remarkable woman beneath, who proved with one gentle question that she was worthy of love, who spent 50 years proving that real partnership is built on mutual respect and genuine seeing of another's soul. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the New Mexico desert, a testament to the truth that real love transcends appearances and deepens with time. And it all began with a simple question, asked by a cowboy who had the wisdom to see what others missed: that Katherine Foster was not defined by her scar, but by her strength, intelligence, kindness, and indomitable spirit. In the end, they proved that the town gossips were wrong, that love finds a way when two people have the courage to see each other truly, and that the most beautiful love stories are built not on perfection but on acceptance, partnership, and the daily choice to value and cherish another person completely. Their legacy lived on in the ranch they built, the children they raised, the lives they touched. But most powerfully, it lived on in the story itself, a reminder that we are not defined by what others see when they look at us, but by who we choose to be and how we choose to love. Katherine and Preston chose each other, chose love, chose partnership, and in doing so, they created something that transcended time and circumstance. They told her she would never find a husband. The cowboy proved them wrong with one gentle question, and in doing so, he gave her not just love but validation, partnership, and a life beyond her wildest dreams. Together, they wrote a story that would inspire generations, a testament to the power of seeing beyond the surface to the truth of another's worth. And that story, like their love, endured forever.